Neo, The World Ends With You. More like The World Doesn't Know You. I was going to play this title back in the end of 2024, but ended up postponing it until now due to scheduling issues, which I seem to be having this entire year. This title, though, is a sequel to the DS game that released a very long time ago. You know, only 14 years. So the difference in presentation is naturally very noticeable. Thankfully, there is an anime of the first game, which does help accommodate all that returning plot points and characters in Neo, because things definitely started to get confusing in week 3 when we had new characters introduced every day. This game also seems to suffer from what would seem to be the Persona 3 treatment, where there is a newly released version of the original game, and it's on the Switch, which has new content from the original game, and it apparently also affects the Neo's story. This kind of reminds me of the Persona FES content, which I couldn't consume in P3P, but it's in Persona 3 Reload. So regardless, this look back is strictly on Neo and the events and context that occur in it. This means that speculative extrapolation and thoughts are going to be based purely on what is presented in this title. The secret files do give an outsider perspective on the game from someone who doesn't even appear in this title, the producer. So I'm just going to believe that their information is accurate and the world building that they provide is not fake news. I also watched The World Ends With You anime after finishing Neo, so I had a better idea of the world building as well as the differences in the Reaper's games and rules, but no need for any further introductions. This, like all other traditional lookbacks, follows the same structure of story, characters, and functions, so let's get to it. So before I even start, I went into this game thinking it was going to be some type of mystery noir detective game similar to titles like Danganronpa and Judgment. Didn't expect supernatural elements in an urban pop setting. Neo takes place in Shibuya because of course it does. Video games really like the destruction of Shibuya apparently, and over the course of 3 weeks you fight for first place to escape the game that you were wrongfully placed in. Except it's not that simple, and week 1 does a really good job at keeping the world building and introduced characters to a small amount. Looking back on the whole experience, week 1 is my most enjoyable section due to the story's mystery and the naivete of the wicked twisters. Rindo and the group aren't taking the game seriously, and we got Minami, who is basically Batman, who just shows up when needed. The plot presents itself as a very linear objective, with taking down the Runebringers, who is solely represented by Susukichi, who you fight at the end of the week. I like the overall mystery and execution of the first 7 days, since it doesn't overwhelm new players who haven't played the prior games with initial foreshadowing to elements that they might not pick up on, so it feels like a completely new experience. Week 2 and 3 are the ones that introduce all of that new returning stuff, such as the characters, terminology, world building, and closure for what would seem to be the first game. For this story, I didn't really lose the plot until I consumed the secret files. There's a lot of unknown entities that just don't physically show in the game, which are pretty key components to why the Reaper's game exists in the first place, specifically speaking the conductor and producer. After completing week 2, I had a good feeling that the following week was going to tie into the first game, since we started getting more scenes with the Shibuya Reapers and context surrounding Shinjuku's inversion. Honestly, it makes me wonder why the first game isn't on Steam, given it's been reconstructed for the Switch, but this isn't the first time that game studios have made questionable marketing moves. Week 3 is the final week, and this is where the first game meets Neo. Besides all the new characters introduced that I did enjoy, it didn't take away from the main story. Neku, Beat, and the rest of the Shibuya cast all take a secondary role relative to Rindo, as well as the Shinjuku Reapers, which I appreciate, since the cast only proportionally expands with every week. Overall, I have to say that I enjoyed every day I spent in the UG. There were lots of days where I considered them more slice-of-life components since nothing story-related was progressed, but you get to spend more time with the wicked twisters, such as walking around town investigating urban legends or solving puzzles all over the city. It was pretty memorable for me and made the game feel like it didn't have to rush the plot or make every day some sort of high-stakes challenge, even though it technically is. The direct telling of the story, in fact, is very simple to understand relative to the actual scope of Neo, but goes much deeper when you want to, speculative into the secret files. These descriptive documents are lore-filled and also indicate for me that this game was made on a budget. I would have liked to learn more about the Angels and where or who the conductor of Shibuya is. I know who it is now, but for the most part, it's a mystery. The producer also is simply not in this game. Judging from the perspective they use, given the hierarchy and responsibility of the Reaper's game, it would seem that multiple parties would have had to agree to Shibuya's inversion, and at least one of these parties would have inferred Kubo's intent weeks before even Rindo arrived at the UG. It was just surprising, and stars aligning I guess, that the unnamed producer, conductor, Josh, and the other Angels besides Haz, in the end let Kubo get this far into his meddling. As for the secret ending cutscenes for both Another Day and The Last Day, they were more insightful as to why the ending events occurred as they did. Minami is definitely the most mysterious character after consuming all the game's content, and seeing both composers in the end The Last Day speaking to each other was a cool, literal behind the scenes of not just the Reaper's game, but as to why the game exists in the first place. The only negative I have about the story is that I really wish that Kubo was either a boss fight or got some characterization. Although Kubo's reveal as an angel and executor are cool, showing his difference in strength to both Reapers and players was something that we just didn't get to see. Kubo got the throwaway villain role as he absolved every runebringer of their opposition. He brainwashes Shiba, seals Tsugumi's soul, and I guess baited Susukichi to face Shiba to kickstart the inversion. What I'm trying to say is the game just chose Kubo to be the bad guy in the end, and he died without us knowing anything about him. But who cares about Kubo, right? There's so many characters in this game, and a lot of them are important. Yeah, not Kubo. So here's how I want to approach this section. I want to discuss Rindo and the Wicked Twisters, and then the other teams, following with the Reapers, and then ending on the minor characters. Don't worry, it sounds like a lot, but it's not going to take as much time as it sounds. Probably. Let's go. So Rindo, a fantastic character. I think this is the first time that I've played as a teenager protagonist that actually acts as a teenager. Crazy, right? At the start of the game, Rindo is literally an NPC. He diffuses responsibility and liability of decisions onto others, and is superficially judgmental of people's identity and benefit that they have for him. His internal thoughts are very repetitive as he ponders in loops, creating more confusion and doubt within him. Rindo is easily influenced as seen with Another and others that have confidence, such as Minami, Beat, and Neku. He even initially views Shoka as an asset on the team purely because she was a Reaper, despite their antagonistic encounters. Rindo's self-centeredness is very evident, but it's also analytical, which does help with his critical decision-making during the many times that he replays scenarios. He's a character that doesn't like to try and wants to go with the flow unless it's necessary for him to step up. The Wicked Twisters are next, and I'm only going to include Fret, Nagi, and Shoka into this category. Beat and Neku are both returning characters and are evidently complete as characters already. Starting with Fret, who is just as awesome as Rindo is. Similar to him, Fret suffers from communication issues. Rindo keeps his thoughts to himself, but Fret doesn't, instead acting as the surrogate leader at most times, pushing Rindo towards decisions. His backstory is revealed pretty late in the game after a bad and unknown friendship. Fret gave up trying to be genuine as he figures people just want to come out of interactions in a positive manner. And so, Fret carries himself in a superficial manner to which more mature characters are able to see through it, like Nagi and Beat. His interactions with Kanon are what begin to break his character as he comes to realize about the facade and how it actually causes its own set of miscommunication, interpretations, and frustrations. Overall, he has a very nice, complete development as he starts taking a genuine interest in Nagi's hobbies and being more involved in the people that he interacts with. Nagi is very interesting as well. She's not your typical otaku, well, she is, but also she's the resident mom of the group. She's also a college student, which makes the interactions even more funny when you realize that the first 2 weeks are just two socially awkward teenagers solving puzzles around Shibuya with an otaku college girl. Anyways, Nagi, despite her thesaurus diction and physical appearance, is emotionally very intelligent and logically grounded. Unlike Rindo and Fret, she doesn't need to grow or discover herself, as she is fully accepting of how she presents her personality and her hobbies. What makes Nagi great is that she isn't antisocial. In fact, quite the opposite, in which she believes that everybody is unique and that's how they overcome their own challenge, instead of simply not caring about what others think. Shoka is the last member who caught me by surprise, even more so than Neku's return. I was quite convinced that she was Swallow, but was predicting that Rindo would have to fight and erase her, which would be a critical moment in the story. But it just turns out that Shoka is a massive tsundere. Who would have thought? She's an interesting character because you can tell that she appears out of place in the Reaper's lineup. She's much younger and less composed than her peers like Ayano, Uzuki, Kariya, Kai, and Shiba, and because of this I believe that it made her more emotionally unstable due to not having anyone to relate to or confide in. I think that's why she becomes more progressively involved with the Wicked Twisters as the weeks go by, as they're around the same age demographic, and also her knowing that Rindo was her fan-go friend. How did you know? The therapist section of Rindo mentally prepping Shoka for Ayano's fight was more so funny than serious, since eventually Shoka catches on to what you're doing, like, "Huh, I see. Here to convince me again, are you?" But it was nice to see both of them open up to each other, since their relationship dynamic had the most friction due to their prior interactions. Also, Shoka is best female design. I like the hoodie very much. So next on the list are the other teams, which is not specific. I just want to quickly talk about the other teams in the Reaper's game. First of all, I enjoyed how they used some of the NPC team members for world building using the side quest. The quest where you help the Deep River Society member inspire the chef and the shoplifting Pureheart are memorable examples that helped solidify my understanding of the world and made the other teams feel like they had a presence outside of the story. Okay, that's it. I just wanted to acknowledge that one Deep Rivers member who will never have the chance to try that new curry. You'll rest in peace. Moving on, the Reapers are next, and I mainly just want to appreciate how sick their designs are. Not the red hoodie guys. Those guys are fucking assholes. But both the Shibuya and Shinjuku Reapers have their own unique fashion, and I find it interesting, and a nice little detail too. Based on each Reaper's attire, you can almost infer what they did for work back in the RG. Uzuki, for example, could be a businesswoman, Shiba, a host, and Koko, a fairy princess? Wait. You would also think, as the Reaper's game moderator, this faction would be pretty easy to dislike, since they're kind of the antagonistic faction, but they're really just an assortment of free agents that kind of do their own thing. It certainly made it harder and more interesting to predict who was trying to help Rindo in the long run. And finally, the minor characters, those whose screen time was erased by the producer of the game. Who is the producer? Square Enix. This section includes Matoi, Kanon, and the most uneventful Tsugumi. Matoi was a good positive and negative role model for Rindo, teaching him about how not everybody is as they seem. I think the impact of his erasure could have been more impactful if he parted with Rindo, telling him to believe in himself and his power more. Kanon is similar to Matoi's role and acts as a foil to Fret, who appears superficially similar, but is more self-aware and confident about herself. Although the Reaper's game contained a lot of deceit, Kanon may have been one of the very few characters who was honest with the Wicked Twisters during all their encounters. I believe she wasn't just a role model for Fret as well, but also Rindo, helping them orient into the game's rules and hidden gray areas too, which wouldn't be beneficial for her in the long run. And finally, there's Tsugumi, who is a very strange character. I feel like she was designed and written to be a playable and integral character, tying both the original game and Neo's story together. Given her brother was Shinjuku's conductor, and she's the sole survivor of Shinjuku's inversion, it really is strange that the game sidelined her as a Skyrim soul gem. There are other even more minor characters like Ayano, Hishima, Kai, and Susukichi, but their existence seemed to exist for plot-pushing purposes, which were fulfilled. So we're at the end here. Why haven't I talked about our lord, Sho Minamimoto? Honestly, it's partially because he's a returning character, and partial because I don't even know who he is. I'll be speaking onwards with the context of consuming the anime for this part only. So, Sho has been a player, a reaper, a game master, and then died and was resurrected by Coco. He then also, from what I can infer, goes back in time after Neku defeats him during week 3, day 4, which is why there are 2 Minamis in Another Day. I believe this is only possible because he absorbed some of Rindo's bird noise at the end of week 1, day 7, after Suzukichi's defeat, and thus gained that power, albeit temporarily. So the real Minami that we see at the end of the game might not even be him. Or maybe he's like partially a noise because of how much shit he put his body through. Minami's intentions are also so hilariously simple. He just wants to be the composer so he can make a world for himself. I mean, there's no shot he gives a damn about Zeptagram 1 or 2. But having a character in a game that doesn't hold any allegiances or values is quite refreshing and symbolizes his mathematical personality as an unpredictable variable that doesn't conform to any rules in a game. So Nioh is an ARPG with an assortment of side activities to engage in as you progress the main story. There's side quests, pig noise, and optional deep dives that are all worth it, as most of them can reward you with multiple rare pins that increase your combat capabilities. Let's start off with the negatives though, because I have a few with some systems, but it's best I just list them all here so we can get to the good shit. First, combat animations. The clarity is really difficult to infer in the late game when you're controlling 6 character pins. This isn't unique, by the way. Most ARPGs do suffer from this type of situation, but since the colors and effects are so stylized in Nioh, it's quite easy to lose your positioning and cued actions when several explosions go off. Second, deep dives should have a retry button since you don't know the enemy lineup and positioning when you jump into it. Also, it just helps in general since you're not always going to hit that goal in your first run, believe me. And thirdly, since I'm already being critical, it's for all lower difficulty drops to be included in defeating ultimate enemies should you fail to get the ultimate drop. That would encourage second playthroughs on each chapter only once, as you're at least guaranteed to get all the other missing items you don't have on your Noisepedia, and can then grind the boss noise for the remaining ultimates, since the Noisepedia doesn't track which weeks or days each noise appears on, apparently, because playing on various difficulties is just, in general, inconvenient. Alright, I'm done shitting on the game. So what can you do in Nioh? Well, you can walk around the beautiful instances of Shibuya, taking in the sights, restaurants, shops, and the noise. The highlight of this title was the unique art style and presentation of the game. A lot of care was put into the creation of the game's characters, environments, and overall systems. The menus are stylized with urban visuals such as your hunger meter is a battery, your ultimate attacks are called mashups and killer remixes, your combat chaining is called a beat drop, your threat abilities are activated with enough style, and you can dance around town to the BGM. Even the shop's NPCs have unique portraits and their own short story in the social network tab, which really links the characters together, making the world feel alive and connected. The story and exploration in of itself, though, is quite linear, and every side activity is always easily accessible and quick to complete. The pig noise can be easily defeated, side quests exclusively take place in the same area, and deep dives may only be a challenge that you may need to come back to in chapter select due to their difficulty, or you not having the correct pin setup to beat the clock. Eating and restaurants is the main source of improving your combat efficiency, as it not only permanently increases your stats, but also your style, which opens up new threat abilities. Stats also really matter once you reach the second week, as you start encountering more aggressive types of noises that require quick dispatching. Pins are your interchangeable weaponry that is really neat. I like the system a lot. First of all, the pin designs are incredible, and I love how each brand has their own unique style. My favorite series has to be the Shepherd House. I feel like this pin set tells a story. You know, you got this sheep, he's traveling all over the world, and I'm just the cameraman. I'm here to witness it. They also come in 3 different types of inputs, which are important because having a balance between hard-hitting hold pins and rapid tap pins will create your own unique rhythm to hitting those beat drops in combat. I found some pins to be incredibly niche, like the wires, but in a fight against one tough noise, the pins you never use may be the ones that can save the day. So moral of the story is to level up all your pins. That's right, all 333 of them. Nioh also has an endgame to work towards with a super boss and a boss rush in Another Day. Both are quite enjoyable as they bring their own unique challenges in approaching them. Your base stats and pin assortment really matter here, and the rewards that you get for it are some unique pins alongside some secret ending cutscenes, which I already talked about, and they give more insight into the game's ending. And that is going to be our wrap up on Nioh, my favorite game of this year. I'm very happy that this game didn't fly under my radar. There are so many hidden JRPGs out there, and we're not always lucky that all of them even get ported here to the West, let alone to PC. I'm not going to hope that the first game will come to PC, since I did settle on consuming the anime for filling in these holes in the lore alongside learning about Neku and the original gang. Anyways, I'm leaving Shibuya. I've been here in like 3 different JRPGs, and the next time I visit, I'd rather do it in real life. I'm not really sure what our next stop is either, since I'm probably releasing this a bit after the series is over, but know that it's some summer related or themed title.